As chair of the John and Pat Hume Foundation for Peaceful Change, Making and Reconciliation, to give it its full title, it's my pleasure to welcome all who are tuned in to this event, and in particular, of course, to welcome our chair and moderator, Dr. Katy Radford, and the panelists who will lead the discussion. This event is the third in a series organized by the Foundation under the title of Reconciliation, the Unfinished Business. Our theme for this evening's discussion is diversity and inclusion. John and Pat Hume highly valued diversity and worked for inclusion and reconciliation. John frequently said that diversity is of the essence of humanity, and that we should celebrate diversity, not push it to the point of division as we so frequently do here in Northern Ireland. Sadly, we continue to witness incidents and to hear comments which point in a different direction to celebration, in a different direction to reconciliation. These incidents and comments mean that there are still some people who reject the very notions of celebrating difference, of including diversity and reconciliation. And this reality puts a serious obligation on those of us who are working for reconciliation to redouble our efforts to counter those trends. In our discussion, we shall hear from a panel of voices from diverse backgrounds as they reflect on their own and their society's experiences. So at this point, I want to hand over to Dr. Katy Radford to introduce herself and indeed to introduce our panelists. And I look forward very much indeed to the discussion that will follow. Katy, over to you.
Sean, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for your presence here with us today. Your active participation in the event is a key component of its success, and so a proportion of our time together will be dedicated to your questions to the speakers as a follow-up to the issues that they address. Please put your speech into the chat, and I will try my hardest to make sure that they're responded to. I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of all the panel to thank Alan Meban for his immense technical support, to Tim Atwood and all those attached to the John and Pat Hume Foundation for inviting us to contribute to their considerations of such sensitive and thorny issues that are brought when endeavouring for us all to live together equally and respectfully within a history of divisive identity politics. My thanks too, on behalf of the Foundation, to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and its Reconciliation Department. We have limited time together for a huge issue, so please forgive me if your questions don't get filtered through or if I cut off speakers at any point as a result of my enthusiasm to try and ensure that as many voices as possible can be heard. This year will see us participate in a new census. In our last one, taken in 2011, 32,400 people, that's only 1.8% of our population, indicated that they belonged to a minority ethnic community. And despite those low numbers, that was more than double the proportion of 10 years earlier, when the figure stood at 0.8%. We've become more cognizant that our children are likely to increase their chances of a better life with the benefit of speaking Arabic or Mandarin, and we've changed many policies in our statutory service provision since then to evidence better that intercultural integration does not have to mean assimilation. But since the last census, globally, we've seen a rise in right-wing and ultra-nationalist extremism, resulting in brutality and murder. And here, an incremental growth in some hate incidents and hate crimes directed at those from minority communities are often underreported to the PSNI, with few successful PPS prosecutions for myriad reasons. In opening his introduction to the review of hate crime legislation, which is currently being considered by the Minister and Department for Justice, Judge Desmond Marrinan quotes from the 19th century essayist William Hazlitt to say, "Hating makes patriotism an excuse for carrying fire. It leaves a narrow, jealous, inquisitorial watchfulness over the actions and motives of others." But our minority communities are not others, they are us. They include travellers who are indigenous to this part of the world, as well as people who are recent economic migrants and asylum seekers, with over 1,600 Syrians here through the Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme. They include those who are successful professional and commercial families here in their 5th and 6th generations. And they include Muslims, Sikhs and Jews whose faith identity unites individuals who would otherwise be disconnected as a result of their language and national identity. And those most difficult to pigeonhole by statisticians, who are all too often forgotten as they come from multiple heritage backgrounds, and whose intersectionality can pose complex identity questions in relation to their cultural traditions and rituals. All of the panelists today continue to make valuable contributions to the climate in which our integration and our intercultural relationships flourish. And I'm going to begin by introducing each one by name and occupation and ask them to add anything else of relevance that I'd like to share with you. So first we have Nisha Tandon, who's the recipient of multiple prestigious international and governmental awards for her contribution to the arts, culture, heritage, and the minority ethnic sector. A graduate of the National School of Drama in New Delhi, Nisha is a trained classical Indian dancer. In 2006, she founded and remains the director of ArtsEkta, and the following year she initiated the multicultural, multidisciplinary arts festival in Belfast, the Belfast Mela, now attracting subsidised audiences in their tens of thousands, which has become an established and prominent intercultural symbol within many social, cultural and tourist calendars of events. Nisha, is there anything you'd like to add before I move on?
Thank you for a lovely, lovely introduction. I didn't know that I have done so much. Yes, my background is Indian dancer. But I love dancing. And on top of that, yes, I would just like to say that you mentioned that there are Syrian refugees who have come recently and, in the resettlement scheme. I just wanted to say that we work very closely and we have just finished our Peace 4 program, and there's a fantastic report which we have produced.
Super. Let's get on to those when we go to the questions. So thank you so much.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I want to say, that it's not just the arts, but I use arts as a tool, and it is the refugee and asylum, which we are working with very closely as well.
Thank you. Lillian Seenoi-Barr is the director of the West Migrant Forum, founded by her in 2012 to advance minority rights and social justice. She's the former chair of the SDLP for Derry City and Strabane, and has been a vocal cultural and political activist both here and in her first homeland, Kenya. She organised the Black Lives Matter protest in Northern Ireland, subsequently becoming the notable leading voice and most highly profiled media commentator on systemic racism and racial injustice. She has a particular interest in the participation of women from minority groups in public life and the ways that government and communities could and should support cultural diversity and engagement through policy making. Lillian, anything you'd like to add to that?
Thank you, Katie. I think you have exhausted my list, so thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Alfie Wong is the race and ethnicity champion for the Northern Ireland Civil Service. As the chair of both the Northern Ireland Civil Service Race and Ethnicity Staff Network and the Department of Finance's Racial Equality Network, he's responsible for increasing staff awareness of the race equality strategy and issues relevant to the departmental policy and operational areas of work, which include oversight of NISRA, the agency responsible for the census. A committed believer in the strengths that come from a diverse society where all are treated equally and fairly, Alfie is a true collaborator in the word's finest sense. He believes that it's by harnessing the power of different experiences, knowledges and skills that together we can, will, should and must create a better future for all. Alfie, anything to add?
Thanks very much, Katie. I think I'm very flattered. But I wanted to say is that I'm very delighted to be invited today to participate on this panel discussion with joining our partners in the minority ethnic sector. I believe it's important that we promote inclusive conversations like tonight and that we collaborate to achieve the aims of, for example, the racial equality strategy. We know that the journey is long, but by working together, we shall build a better future for all. And in doing so, we create a shared history in which we all played a part.
Thank you, Alfie. And finally, and when she has finished speaking, I'm going to hand over to Ivy Goddard to make a little introduction to the programme today. Ivy is the chair of the Race Equality Subgroup, which is convened by the Executive Office. It's a peer-led intercultural group convened with a secretariat that feeds back into the Executive Office and it oversees the implementation of the 2015-2025 Race Equality Strategy. And as if that wasn't enough, Ivy's project director of the Interethnic Forum, where her commitment to those from a range of minority, ethnic and faith backgrounds has seen her devise, deliver and support a wide range of initiatives to support the welfare, cultural practices and human rights of people in her part of the world. This work furthers her commitment to the area where the organisation is based, namely Mid and East Antrim, and there she is also Deputy Lieutenant, where she fulfills additional societal duties. Ivy, you're going to tell us a little bit and set the context for the work that we're all engaged in here today, so thank you.
Thank you, Katie, for your kind introduction, and especially for inviting me to speak here today. It's a huge honor for me to speak at an event organized by the John and Pat Hume Foundation, particularly because, as you all know, John Hume received the Gandhi Peace Prize. And as the Indian government said, the Indian nation pays tribute to an extraordinary man who, by his fearlessness, selflessness, and dedication to the cause of humanity, upheld those ideals which were dearest to Mahatma Gandhi, who, of course, means a lot to almost every Indian. So for the past 12 years or more, in Northern Ireland, my quest has been to get racial equality for the ethnic minority communities in Northern Ireland. But progress has been excruciatingly slow. But now, in the middle of a pandemic, which has disproportionately affected people from the Black and minority ethnic communities, I still have hope that things will change and that we are turning a corner. And a lot of the work that we have done at the Racial Equality Subgroup has contributed to that. So, and the hope that is there is also, has been supported by the work of my colleagues who are here on the panel, Lillian and Nisha, who've been extraordinary in their work, as well as Alfie, who has been our ally right from the start and who has supported our work through his commitment to racial equality. As you briefly mentioned, Katie, the figures that were there in the 2011 census will be hugely increased when we have the figures for the 2021 census. If you look at the EUSS figures, that is the people who have registered for the EU settlement scheme, the latest figures show about 81,000 EU nationals who have made their home in Northern Ireland. And so if you take into account the others who are here, including the communities from India, from China, from every other country, you will see that we're estimating it would be more than 150,000 who would be here this time around. So I think it is really important for our voices to be included, because there can be no peace and reconciliation if you have a community, the ethnic minority communities, being left behind. So therefore, it is hugely important, events like this where we are asked to speak so that, our voices are heard and our voices are included. So I thank you for that. Now, through the Racial Equality Subgroup, we are tasked to implement the Racial Equality Strategy. And as I said earlier, it has been slow, but things are moving forward. We have established the Racial Equality Subgroup, of which, Katie, you were chair for the first 2 years. And we've also established the Racial Equality Champions in every department. Now, in the pre-COVID days, we did meet with the champions and we had established thematic groups, the education thematic subgroup, which looked at racist bullying. We had established a hate crime thematic group, which looked at hate crime. But of course, that work had come to a halt during COVID, but we are hoping to pick up again. And there is going to be a facilitated day where we'll be looking at our action plan and, our work with the racial equality champions. But in the meantime, in the past few months, what we have been able to do, and one of the things that you have mentioned, Katie, was the work of Judge Manar and the hate crime legislation review, which is a really important piece of work. And we are hoping that the minister will be looking at it in the next few months and implementing the recommendations thereof. Another piece of work which is really important and which we've been asking for the past 10 years or more has now come to the fore, and that is the ethnic monitoring. And that has really been shown up, particularly during the pandemic, when we have had people from our communities disproportionately affected. And we are relying on statistics from Public Health England, which has showcased that. Whereas, we do not have that here in Northern Ireland. So, it's very, very difficult for us to be able to respond to the fact that, our communities are more disproportionately affected by COVID. So therefore, we welcome the work that Dr. Ray Russell has put in, an excellent report, which is now with the department and hopefully is being looked at. The other thing that we have been able to do is the race, Dr. Kushney, Mr. Kushney has come to us and had looked at the race relations order. So that again is in process, and hopefully within the scope of the next mandate of the government, we will be seeing the implementation and the changes of the race relations order. So there's a whole host of work that has happened in the past few months. We are also anticipating the imminent release of the refugee integration strategy for all refugees and asylum seekers. There's a huge amount of work done on the redrafting to take into consideration the work of the Innovation Lab last year, and the draft has been considered by the representatives of our sector and the departments, and we're hoping that will be out for consultation very, very soon. There's also been work, as I said earlier, about tackling racism in schools, racial bullying in schools, and once again, we're hoping that the Act, the Addressing Bullying in Schools Act 2016 will be very soon be considered, and there will be a date given to us for the commencement of this legislation. So this is some of the work that we have been doing, but of course it has taken us quite a number of years to come to this point. But I'm hoping that in the next few years, we will see much speedier progress, and we're hoping to put pressure on our governments, on our ministers, to ensure that all this has been implemented, and that once again, it's not left to the side as it has been for the past so many years. So that's where I will just stop now, Katy, and hand back to you. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Ivy, for giving us an overview of where we are, where we're going. Much appreciated. And as I say, and I reiterate, please to the participants, please do put things into the chat if you'd like to have them addressed by any or all of the panelists. So let us go to our first question. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to put it to the individual panel members, each the same question. And then please feel free to cut across one another if you want to take up what someone else has said. So Ivy, let's stay with you for a moment. John Hume once said that the basis of peace and stability in any society has to be the fullest respect for human rights of all its people. As we mentioned earlier, we've got a census coming out. We've also got the closing of the consultation by government for its outcomes for a draft programme for government. And I'm just wondering whether you can speak to how respect might be measured and provide an indicator of good relations, which is what is anticipated in that document. Could the panel members please speak to and unpack this issue of respect and give some examples of where they see the gaps in society in relation to respect and rights of those from minority communities? And that, of course, includes communities of interest and other markers of identity.
Thank you, Katy. For me, respect really is the way we treat each other. And I think to a great extent, that I wouldn't call it a lack of respect, but it is, how little emphasis has been given to racial equality in the past 10 or more years is an indication that, we are not really at the forefront, and that really needs to change. So I would think that, in the Life and Time survey, there is the respect index, which is now has shown increase from 28.1% to 33.1% in the increase in the respect that is there. But I haven't seen any of that, as far as the ethnic minority communities are concerned, and I haven't seen any measurement of index, any measurement so far as to whether our ethnic minority communities feel respected. We haven't been consulted on that so far. We have been consulted on a lot of other issues, as I indicated earlier, Katy, but that really hasn't been something that has come to the fore yet.
Lillian, would you speak to that?
Yes, Katy, thank you very much. Katy, I think for me, when it comes to gaps, it comes to human rights and respect in the north of Ireland, I looked at the respect index chart at the Executive Office website today. And one thing that jumped out for me, we are told that the sample size for sexual orientation and racial groups are too small to provide reliable estimates because the sizes wouldn't matter. It is about rights and respect in that matter. When we look at religion, I am confident that means Christian dominations and not actually religion. If we are focused on religion, we would have Islam and Hindus, for example, included in that list. And we have seen that exclusion from the current census itself, where we only have religion we seem to acknowledge and respect is only Christianity. And the rest are put in one box of others. A clear message, this is not part of minority ethnic people. You are the other. That othering of minority people is still continuing even after 20 years of the Good Friday Agreement. And the fact that racially groups are still often described as newcomers community or others, or rather than truly being considered as an integral part of Northern Ireland. And the literal recognition of the historical contribution of people from minority ethnic communities. Recently we had events where we looked at the history. People started coming here in the 1872. And that two community model is something that we are continuously promoting, which doesn't cover minority groups. And it's quite clearly, for me, it's not showing respect. So I think that the government need to find ways to include at least minority groups, and such as there are larger minority groups who are within the minority ethnic sector itself. And those communities need to start being recognized that they are part of this society.
I think it's interesting, coming from a Jewish background as I do, your point is well accepted, that we do have this kind of dichotomy between, well, it's religion means sectarianism as opposed to a broader thing. And certainly you also have that sense, when we think about flags flying in different places, you have almost this co-opting of different faiths, different communities into different sects over here, which isn't terribly helpful. Alfie, I wonder, would you be kind enough to speak to the issue of respect?
Okay, for me, when it comes to respect, in particular regards to minority ethnic communities, I think it's important that we understand minority ethnic communities. As we know, the definition of ethnic minority is a group within a community which has different national or cultural traditions from the main population. So common misunderstanding is that when we talk about ethnic minorities, we're talking about people who are not white, but a person's ethnicity is never based upon the color of their skin. So therefore, as a champion, I will recognize Irish travellers and our EU citizens as part of my remit. So when it comes to respect of those communities, it's important to recognize that at the end of the day, it's about allowing people, however they may identify, to participate in society as equals and open up opportunity for all. We mentioned earlier about the programme for government. It's important that any outputs or outcomes from that we are able to link in aspects of the racial equality strategy, which has identified certain gaps, that we must address. For example, equality service provision, elimination of prejudice, racism, and hate crime, and of course, encouraging participation in our shared society. So it's important that a lot of work that we have done is not lost, that we are basically trying to reinvent the wheel.
It's nothing about us without us, is for
Yes.
us, isn't it? It's that sense of being spoken with and to rather than at. Nisha, have you something to add to that, please?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with our three speakers, Lillian, Ivy, and Alfie. And I think I have been here long enough, and I have seen and I have grown in conflict and worked in peace and reconciliation. And what I see is a huge, big gap in program for government this time is that indicator of respect. And respect has to come within, and we need to be consulted. It is long gone that it's them and us and us and them. We have to, if we want to progress in this society, if we want to make this a stable country and a peaceful country, we need to include all our residents and all our minority ethnic people. And I think racial equality strategy should be embedded in every department and in every way of our lives. And that's the way we will see. We need to be consulted about flags and emblems. We need to be consulted about leadership, sustainability, resources, community development, you name it. We live in a very multicultural society, and it is not about green and orange anymore. It is about us and us as a team, us as people, us as, whatever religious faith backgrounds we come from, we should be all included in it. And I think it's about time our voices are being heard. And that's the way we will give respect to each other.
Thank you so much. I know I said that I was going to come back to questions at the end, but Kula has put something into the chat, which I'd quite like to share now, because it relates specifically to this. And she's saying there's absolutely no doubt that the subgroup's been trying to advance this race, as you've seen. But she's asking, what is the reason that progress is stalling? What is it? Why is this the case? And do you believe that the Executive Office is truly working with the subgroup? Now, as you said previously, I was involved in it at the very setting up, and it certainly was at that time just really a bit of a rubber stamping exercise, if I can be really truthful about it. We were given a secretariat and we were told what we needed to talk about. And it was only after about a year of being in there that I started to get a bit snarky on it and started to bring in new questions. And I know, Ivy, after William left, you two have been trying to push those boundaries. So I wonder, would you both or speak to how it's positively changed and what the stoppages are for you now?
I think that at the moment, as I said, in my talk earlier, that I definitely see hope. And I have said, about the ethnic monitoring, which is being progressed, about the race relations order, which is being progressed. So I think that the team at the Executive Office is definitely committed. And I know that, not having ministers for the 3 years has definitely had an impact on that. And then, of course, there is all the other issues that come to the forefront, which pushes race equality to the back. Like, for instance, there's Brexit, there's COVID, now there's the protocol. So there's always a reason why, other issues go to the front and, the issues of racial equality can take a backseat. But I think that really needs to change, because at the moment, we've waited really very, very long for the things that we wanted implemented. And I know that Camilla has mentioned about ethnic monitoring. If there was ethnic monitoring in place, then we would know absolutely, unequivocally, which communities are being affected. Right now, it is anecdotal. And because of the work I do with the Northern Health Trust and the Public Health Agency, I know that our communities are being affected. I know from consultants who work in the Antrim Area Hospital that, our communities are being affected. But we don't have figures. So therefore, we don't know how much and how disproportionately they are being affected. So, and if we had ethnic monitoring, we would have known by now.
Thank you so much. So unless anybody has any follow-up points that they'd like to make, then I'm going to move on to a second question. I'd just like to draw your attention to those of you who aren't in the chat. Porrig has posted in there just saying that There's sadly lacking respect for all minorities in the 6 counties. As an Irish speaker, he finds it particularly challenging that this disrespect is shown to an Indigenous language, and I'd just like to draw people's attention to that. So my next question, I'm going to start with Lillian. Lillian, John Hume described Derry as the worst example of Northern Ireland's discrimination. Despite huge advances in legislation, policy and practice, and attitudinal change, we hope, how do you think discrimination still manifests itself here, and not in Derry, so more broadly in this part of the world? And what are some good examples that you can give in your experience of the work that you and others are doing to address this?
You know, when I had Ivy speak, it just reminded me of something that I came to understand very recently, and something that I've realized that has not been talked about here in Northern Ireland, and that is structural racism and institutional racism, which is not being really recognized, let alone being tackled. It's common for it to be downplayed in this part of the world or being dismissed. And a very good example, can we even think of any government department or organization that has acknowledged systemic racism in Northern Ireland or even tried to deal with it? And Nisha's mentioned about the racial equality strategy. And when I think about the racial equality strategy, it recognizes the need for all public bodies and others to ensure that they take urgent steps to identify and tackle racism. There's particularly systemic racism. The strategy also recognizes that before racial equality and good relations can be effectively mainstreamed, each government department and public authorities need to explicitly recognize and acknowledge the barriers of racial equality and good race relations and tackle it where they see it or to overcome it. It's 15 years since the first racial equality strategy was developed. I was not even in this country by then. And there is no evidence that I have seen since I started working in the community sector where a public body has taken the steps to identify systemic racism. We are 20 years since the Good Friday Agreement, and there are communities that are still fighting for their rights. Right to cultural expression, for example, right to the Language Act, Irish Language, which we are still looking for it. So if we are to talk about discrimination, it continues to manifest itself because there is dismissal, there is defensiveness, and there is no acknowledgement that it actually exists. And I am reminded of John Hume's quote where he says, "The real duty now, if we want to have a totally peaceful and stable country, is for all true Democrats to implement the will of the people." So the will of the minority ethnic communities is to implement the racial equality strategy. The will for the people for Northern Ireland was to fully implement the Good Friday Agreement. And for me, when I look at organizations that are doing a good job, or that are the examples of those organizations that are promoting inclusion and diversity, I'm reminded only of civil society organization. I don't see any government department that is really putting enough effort to tackle inequalities in Northern Ireland. And I would mention a very good example that really inspired me was the equal marriage, for example. We've now achieved equal marriage, thank God for that. We are talking about the right to choose for women, and I think Alliance for Choice is doing a great job. I think we have a lot of organizations within Derry, where I live, that are doing a great job in peace and reconciliation. And of course, I'll talk about the West Migrant Forum because I do believe they're doing a good job.
So tell me, just go back over that for a second, Lillian, for me, because you say no systemic racism, and we had Lord Macpherson die recently, who was the instigator of the Stephen Lawrence look at the racism within the Metropolitan Police. I'm wondering, where do you sit then in terms of equality legislation? Where do you see that that's not being addressed within some of those statutory bodies? And isn't the race equality subgroup there effectively to hold that to account? Isn't that then, she says rather pointedly, your responsibility as a member of that oversight body to actually call to account and call that truth to power.
Absolutely. And we go back to respect. And do you respect the voice of minority ethnic people? Are you listening? Are you hearing what we are saying? And you and I have been in the subgroup together, and there is a time where we say, this is just a talking shop. It's really not acting as that voice of minority ethnic people that needs. We're supposed to be a strong voice for minority ethnic people. We're supposed to be the group of people that is entrusted by the executive to bring the issues of minority ethnic on the table so that we can resolve it. But like Ivy says, I'm hopeful now. I think there is awakening since the Black Lives Matter protests. I've seen that there is quite a lot of action happening. I think Ivy did not mention about the Race Equality Act. We now know that there's a lot of progress that is being made on that. And I'm really glad that Richard Krushney has really taken that as a personal challenge for himself at the executive office. And I'm very proud of that. I'm hoping that we are going to get a timeline on when the ethnic monitoring is going to be delivered. I'm conscious that we now have a report that has been published on hate crime, and we still don't have a timeline on how it's going to be implemented, the recommendations that were made. I met with the minister just last week, and she alluded that it will not happen within this term. It's until the next Stormont term. So I think it's important that we can get a timeline before the next election, because we don't know who's going to be going back there and who's going to be the minister next time. But I think we can absolutely do something before then.
Brilliant, thank you. Let me move, Alfie, you are also connected through the civil service, obviously. Would you speak to this?
Yes, as regards to the question, yes. Discrimination exists. Yes, fortunately, still does exist, as it does every country across the world. Annual hate crime statistics still record racism as being the top. It's still ahead of sectarianism. We've had obviously the Black Lives Matter, where the murder of George Floyd in the US has resonated deeply with communities here. We've had the COVID. Obviously, we're still in the COVID pandemic. And since a few people, including the odd world leader, attaching ethnicity to the pandemic, there is a rise in coronavirus hate crimes instances directed at Asian communities. We have had Brexit, where our EU citizens, friends and families and colleagues have been targeted extremely against. And also we all know that on the 21st of March is the International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So yes, racism, unfortunately, discrimination does still exist. As regards samples of work, well, within the civil service, there is change. There's positive change. Upon becoming the Race and Ethnicity champion, one of the first things on my agenda was to establish a staff network, and this was to ensure that, as the saying goes, when diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and then belonging is having that voice be heard. So when it comes to diversity, we as the civil service are conscious that the current service is not representative of the people in society we serve. So I, in my role, have been working closely with our HR as we truly wanted a diverse and inclusive organisation. We've taken forward a range of actions, which include outreach, engagement, recruitment, training, and we even have a diversity action plan. When it comes to inclusion, it's important that this staff network itself to support minority ethnic colleagues, and obviously myself, ensuring that our uniqueness and individuality are valued and respected, is to be a platform for positive change, a vehicle for delivery, embracing the diversity and vibrancy of our shared society, and finally, the voice has to be heard. So the staff network will be involved in the development of relevant civil service policies, initiatives. As we all know, there are skills, knowledge, experience to be recognised and even developed and built upon. And again, there's that key word for your collaboration.
Thanks, Alfie. Nisha?
Yeah, I actually absolutely agree with Lillian and Alfie on this. Alfie's Department of Finance has been absolutely doing great job, and they are trying their level best in the civil service to sort of, bring more of diverse and inclusion in their everyday work. But this example, good practice, which is going on in one department, should be repeated again and again in other departments. Why is it that arts and culture, which sits in Department of Communities, don't even know who their race champion is? So that's where my frustration lies sometimes, that, you're ringing people, you're asking for certain things, and you just don't get the answers. They don't even know. Everybody goes to Alfie for an answer. That's not the way it should be. Every department should be responsible for having their race champion and embedding that racial equality agenda in their everyday work. And that's where I've been sort of knocking at many doors, and it's not helping. But I am so glad that Racial Equality Subgroup is started to do a lovely and really good work, which is, I'm so delighted to hear from Ivy and Lillian that what type of work they are doing together. It's amazing. But as far as the institutional racism is, it still exists big time.
So do we need standards? Does the Race Equality Subgroup need to set standards for working, or is that already in place in the civil service?
I think there should be standards set, and take examples from, I am again going to go for Department of Finance because it has set a good example, okay? And you need to have a permanent secretaries as well who are absolutely passionate about what they are doing and what message they are bringing out to their employees. And that's we are not getting that. We are not getting that from other departments. The permanent secretaries need to come and meet. Maybe they have met the Racial Equality Subgroup. I don't know. But people like us who are doing so day-to-day work, we don't get the chance to meet these people. So I think it's very important that our voices should be heard, and especially the voices of the ethnic minority women should be definitely heard, because I think we cannot be left behind the closed doors.
Katy, can I just say something?
Sure.
Yeah, I think obviously a few years ago, I think the subgroup was also trying to make sense of what their role is. But I have to commend Ivy for an amazing job that she's doing right now. Yeah. I know she's asked us to even develop an action plan on what we would want to achieve before the end of this term. So there's I put my hands up. We haven't really held the executive accountable. And yes, there's a little bit of blame where the fact that we did not have 3 years of, of government, but that shouldn't be an excuse not to mainstream racial equality. I think one of the biggest challenge is the fact that when you look at the racial equality strategy and the outcomes that we are supposed to achieve, the shared aims, departments are very happy to implement the fourth outcome, which is celebration of cultural diversity. But anything to do with access to equality of opportunities, they run away. Anything to do with tackling racism, they run away from that. And I think that is where now our energy needs to be at the subgroup, to ensure that we achieve real equality, because we all have the right to celebrate our cultures. We can celebrate it anywhere. We don't need government to tell us how to do that. But I think when it comes to real equality of opportunities and respect for equal opportunities for people, it's where we need to be more proactive in.
Alfie?
I do feel it's unfair to pick one outcome out of 4 outcomes, which is part of the racial equality strategy. These outcomes, yes, they are meant to be disseminated and communicated, and the racial equality champions ensured that staff are aware. But I think it's I personally feel it's unfair just to pick on one. First one, for example, quality service provision. Yes, it depends on the department and what public services they have. Yes, where they can address it. For the Department of Finance, when it comes to quality service provision, is obviously ensuring that when it comes to government information, that those from minority ethnic communities can access it. For example, our NI Direct website, yes, it has a translation tool on it, which can translate languages. But in doing that, that is only a step. We, Department of Finance, even wider civil service, are keen to collaborate. So where there's feedback, we are keen to hear about it and then work together to develop it further. It is a partnership. It's not a one and done. This is done. Cheerio. No, it's not. Work with us.
I agree. I think it's partnership, and I completely agree. There is quite a lot of work that is happening, but where is the outcomes? Where is the evidence of the true equality that has happened? Putting things in place and willingness to listen to people, but not implementing, there's two different things here. It's okay to meet with people and we express we explain the issues that are there, but if we cannot see the outcomes, where are they? You've given a good example of the website. How about people who do not have gadgets to access the internet? Where do they get that information from? So we need to look at the barriers that are the barriers to that racial equality.
Alfie, I'm going to let you two bounce this around you for a bit until then Ivy's going to come in after you.
No, Lydia's asked a very good question. She is right. Yes, you could have a all singing, dancing website, but there obviously you have folks who don't have digital devices and all. But this comes from also the need for better communication about what departments do and what areas look after. When it comes to digital devices, we have something called digital inclusion, which is to try to address the issue with those who are digitally excluded, who don't have access to their computer, who don't have access to devices. So there are other programs happening within civil service. I accept that maybe there's the lack of communication about what is available. This is where closer collaboration comes in between champions, the racial equality subgroup, and yes, the champions, I feel, yes, are accountable to the racial equality subgroup. So you can hold me to account, and you are my boss. But yes, there are initiatives in place that are very need to be better communicated, and you raised very good feedback then about, yes, obviously people need access to devices to access this website that can support people. That's where the quality service provision outcome comes in, that we have to tackle that. This is part of the racial equality strategy. This is part of what we are working on together, within government, with our wider minority ethnic sector. So there's things to do. Admit it's not going to be instant, but it doesn't mean that we should all give up.
Ivy, you wanted to come in there.
Oh, sorry.
Come in and I say that I just wanted also to commend, the health departments like our public health agency, as well as, our Northern Trust, for instance, who worked very closely with ourselves to improve access and to provide equality of service provision, particularly during the pandemic. I have to say that they have done a tremendous job, knowing full well, that our communities are being disproportionately affected. And even for the rollout of this vaccination program, we have been hugely supported to give out the messages to our communities and to ensure that there is an uptake of that particular program. And I also know that the executive office is working on training for civil servants, for equality and diversity training, which will be rolled out soon. And I think our subgroup is going to be consulted very soon on that, and maybe in the next week or so. So there is a lot of work going on, which is why I say that I'm hopeful for the next, incoming year, that there will be a lot of work that hasn't been done, which will be completed. And I have to give them, pay tribute to those who are working behind the scenes to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because that's coming from a statutory service perspective. I just wanted to bring, Ethna has put something into the chat here saying, this is all very good, but is there an active push or initiative to reflect the diversity of society in public representatives and politicians? And a couple of people have mentioned so far the fact that we had just a little bit of a hiccup in terms of our political representation for some years. Now we're in a position where we do. Is the tokenism, though, from the parties as opposed to real active engagement with those from minority communities?
Can I come in?
Of course. Knock on that door and there you are, Nisha Tandon.
Yes, totally agree that it is just a tokenistic thing which all parties are doing, that you are from, they handpick people. They don't see that, what we can contribute. Yeah, sorry, I'm so sorry to say that. I've lived in this country for so long. I've got thick skin now. I can hear and I can just sort of say whatever I feel like saying. But I really do feel that, yes, you can have slogans of diversity, inclusion, and equality on your on your agendas, but are you really inclusive? And that's what we really need to talk about, and we really need to be worrying about that. Yes, don't go and handpicking, see the qualities of each individual who you are going to be.
I'm confused. Hold on one second. I'm really confused. How can you not handpick if you're going to choose something?
Let me come in, Kate, there, because I was very lucky to have been handpicked by all political parties, and then I made a choice which political party I wanted to go to. In 2018, I was approached by 5 different political parties to stand as their council representative, and I took the initiative as an individual to read about the political parties' manifestos, look at which one that resonate with me, which values and principles that I share with, and I chose the SDLP. When it comes to politics, I think we have a shared responsibility. Minority ethnic people need to be more proactive also in looking at the political parties that they feel they can support. But I think it is, Nisha may be right on one thing. It is about welcoming. It is about feeling that you can belong. So political parties need to be more proactive in welcoming minority ethnic communities to get involved in their own political party as members, recruit them as members, produce policies that can show you can safeguard and protect them. Because we know that the political environment can be really, really difficult for minority ethnic people. It is very difficult. It is a hostile environment for women, whether you are white, black, or black. Imagine a minority ethnic person. And we have a good example of what happened to Anna Lowe when she was in politics. So it's really about becoming more proactive and developing policies that will protect and showing that your house, your political house, is warm and welcoming for minority ethnic people. But I think it's a little bit unfair to say they were handpicked. I would handpick a person if I believe that they are good for my party and that they will work hard and make my party better. So it's a shared responsibility.
Nisha, do you want to come back on that?
Sorry?
I'm asking if you'd like to come back on that.
No, yeah, I mean, okay, Lillian, I don't think that it should be handpicked. It should be welcoming, and it should be open doors for anybody who see that, the way you have said, the policies and practices should be welcoming, and you choose who you want to go to. That's fine. But I don't like the idea of handpicking certain people, especially women from different backgrounds. And you have given a very good example of Anna Lowe. What happened to her? So we don't want to go behind the history. We want to see the new upcoming people and new people. How are we training them? How are we attracting them into the politics and you don't have to have a political background, but you need to know the policies and you need to be welcoming. And that's exactly I am trying. Don't handpick, make them welcome.
I'm going to bring this down a notch. I'm going to go to the populist vote here. Alfie, tell me this. In the fields of addressing inclusion, diversity, or calling truth to power, who are your role models? Let's just get to this bit now.
Okay.
I know you want to answer this question. So.
Yes, something a little bit more lighthearted. Yes. Well, I do admire global figures like Barack Obama. I remember being in Hawaii when he was elected president. Sheer buzz, excitement, and hope that was in the atmosphere. And then we have the likes of Greta Thunberg, who empowered ordinary people of all ages to challenge world leaders. I've heard it said before that the children and youth are leaders of tomorrow. But I say, why wait till then? Let's listen to them and learn from them now. But my actual role model is someone closer to my heart. She is my daughter, Lucy. She was born with a hole in the heart, underwent a heart operation before she was 3, and then a year later she was diagnosed with autism. So yes, she definitely has her challenges, but she never gives up. And she is very kind, well-loved, and respected by everyone around her. Jenny, Milo, and I are so incredibly proud of her, and that where we have an inclusive, equal world, her skills and talents will be recognized. She won't be written off, excluded from opportunities because of her disability, gender, or ethnicity. At the end of the day, she is my inspiration. She drives me every day to work with others, on equality, diversity, and inclusion, to do all I can with the time that I have in the position I find myself in, and ultimately the desire to leave the world in a better place than when I joined it. And so that's why I feel I must never stop. Lucy, the name means light, and her light shows me the way.
Here's to you. Here's to Lucy. Thank you for sharing that. Much appreciated.
Great.
Nisha, globally, locally, who are your role models within this?
I really think that I didn't see anybody from diversity inclusion globally, really tell you the truth. I see more of a peace and reconciliation. And I really think that Malala, Yousafzai, what she has achieved and what peace she has brought, an activist for women's rights. I think she has done a fantastic job. And it's a beautiful Islamic proverb, which I really admire. And I always think about her whenever I'm thinking about this. A lot of different flowers make a banquet. So it make a bouquet. So that's where my Malala is. I love her to bits, and I feel that she's done so much work. And the other ones, again, from peace and reconciliation, Ivy spoke about Mahatma Gandhi. He's the top on my list. And then your Nelson Mandela, and then Dalai Lama. I mean, I am an admirer of those people, and I think they have done a fantastic job where peace and reconciliation. And even if we take a little drop from that ocean and learn from them, I think this country will be very peaceful and successful.
So these are great global examples. I'm thinking as well locally. So can you...
Oh dear, from diversity inclusion?
No, it's about peace and reconciliation as much as diversity and inclusion. It's about how we make...
Actually, for peace and reconciliation, I would definitely give credit to John Hume, who I met about 35 years ago.
You must have been a child, Nisha.
No, I wasn't a child. I wasn't a child. And it was in Lillian's land, Londonderry. And it was, and actually, you know what? I was doing a dance piece, and he came over and he said, diversity and inclusion is so important, and within our peace movement we are definitely going to bring that. And that's what he was, the real man who really wanted to bring peace in this country, and he showed it, he proved it. So yeah, definitely John. Not that because I've been invited by Hume Foundation, but really truly he was a gentleman.
Ivy?
Thank you, Katy. Growing up in India, I never ever thought ever that I would be talking about racial discrimination. It just wasn't there on my agenda, never ever reflected on it globally or locally. And so, it's only after coming here to Northern Ireland and having faced discrimination myself that I realized the impact that racism and racial discrimination can have on people. Globally, of course, as you know, the other panelists have said, there are so many examples, wonderful examples, inspirational, and all of us can take heart that people before us have worked tirelessly to challenge racism. But when I was growing up in India, as some of you may know, it is the multitude of religions and, even between our different states, that is like I'm from Kerala, but even between our states, we're also culturally different. And growing up there, we never ever thought that somebody was a Christian or a Hindu or a Jew or a Jain. We were all in school together. We all socialized together. We never thought about those things. But here I find, that even between the two communities, the differences are so marked. And I found that actually quite shocking that, when I came here, the divisions that were so deep.
I think it's really interesting. Sorry.
So, for me, like having parents who were so open-hearted and welcoming of everybody that I brought home or my brothers brought home was a lesson of inclusion and diversity, really, which I didn't think at that time. And now coming here, that is what I do, including and hoping to be included as well, and to have that voice for those who are voiceless and those who cannot speak for themselves. So that is what drives me, my parents, their ethos, and then here, of course, colleagues that I have met, and not necessarily just those who have worked in the field of race and ethnicity, but those who have helped me here in the work that I do in Mid and East Antrim, the churches, the people from statutory agencies who have helped me along, and I've mentioned the trust and the work that I've done in the last year. They've been absolutely incredible, and there are people in the work that I do here with huge hearts, incredible, so generous. And I know that especially during the pandemic, how they have opened their hearts and given so generously and worked in partnership is something to be commended. I always say that people in Northern Ireland have huge, huge hearts. They're so generous in so many ways. And it's just a small minority that we keep fighting with about, inclusion and racism. And it's always that we always need to challenge there, Katy.
No, it's very good to hear you speak like that. I think one of the challenges for me sometimes, though, is that suspicion that I don't know whether it's transferred over years of separatism and things of that nature. But I did a piece of work a little while ago down in Lurgan, and I was talking to young people, and these young people were on this school bus, and they kept sort of saying, oh, it's terrible because every time our bus goes through this area, they keep throwing snowballs at our bus. And there was this inbuilt fear from these children on the bus that the kids throwing snowballs at them were doing it specifically because they were on a particular school bus going to a particular school. And the other kids were saying, well, we just do it because, it's snowing and we want to throw snowballs around. And there's that kind of thing for me in terms of, where does something be read as discrimination, or where does something be read as something which is purposefully out to hurt someone else? And in fact, it's a jag with a jibe, it's a jibe with a jag. And, it certainly happens in comedy a lot, where you've kind of got people saying things and you just don't know, where's that line, where's that boundary? And how do you respect somebody if you're not sure what those boundaries are? Anyway, Lillian, tell me, who do you, who's your role model, locally, globally? And you're not allowed to have John Hume, we've already had John.
I do have a lot of role models, I have to say. I'll start with my parents. Maybe many of you would not know, my parents have 14 children. So I have 8 brothers and 5 sisters. And my parents treated all of us equally, but also recognizes the differences between us as their children. And my parents are very conservative Christians. And when we were growing up, my parents were Protestants, but they took me to a Catholic school because they recognized the importance of us having a good education. So in that time in Kenya, the good schools were boarding schools, which was a Catholic-run school. And they respected all our choices. When you go to a boarding school and you meet all your age groups and you're all in the same, you're going to the same chapel. Then when you go back home or holidays, you want to continue with that. They never really forced us to go to the same church that they were going to. And ideally, my parents would have preferred that we all marry the Maasai from the Maasai tribe, because the Maasai tribe is one of the small tribes in Kenya. So they hold this view: the more Maasai people marry Maasai people, the more we have so many children, and then we are not going to be a minority within our own country because we're going to multiply. But there was only 1 out of 14 who got married to a Maasai man. So they really respected that choice of diversity and inclusion within the family, and they welcome everybody. And then recently, my brother has always been my role model and my mentor. He's a senator in Kenya. And recently he did something that was so inspiring to the whole country. He decided that he is not going to dress with which he terms the colonial style dressing code, where you go to the parliament with a suit and a tie. And he decided to wear his own Maasai tribe because he's a very proud Maasai man. And he went to parliament buildings. And when the sergeant at arms stopped him, he says, you have a choice to send a representative of 100,000 people out, or you let me in to do my business, because I'm a Maasai and I'm representing the Maasai people. And Kenya is now a free country, and we should design our own policies and our own rules. And that inspired a change of rule that traditional attires are now accepted in parliament, which has never happened before. So he really fought for that recognition of minority groups, traditions, and the fact that they are Kenyans and they are not even able to have their own cultures within their own country in a place of power. So he is one of my role models. And of course, if I come to here, I cannot not mention Bernadette McCluskey. She took me in, and I've seen the kind of work that she's done. The woman is in her 70s and she is not stopping. She's still going ahead, talking about diversity and inclusion and fighting for minority rights. So she's an inspiration to me.
Thank you so much. I think unless anybody else wants to follow up on any of that, I think we're going to move on to our final question now. And Nisha, I'm going to start with you because we have mentioned the arts just a little bit. And the arts and intercultural art exhibitions and performances are recognized by many, many policymakers, educators, practitioners, health service for their intrinsic value and their instrumental role that they play in addressing social inclusion. I know this is close to your heart, so I'd like you to draw on some examples, if you can, from here or elsewhere if you want to look at the power and the benefits of cultural celebrations.
Right, okay, that's my journey. Arts because I'm very passionate about it, and I think arts, culture and heritage absolutely is a very, very important tool for social inclusion and social impact, which it can make on everyday life. And that's where we are absolutely, we need to bring arts to the level at many government departments, and which we are not doing it. But arts, in my opinion and in my journey, it stimulates creativity. It has emphasized that the globalized multicultural society, which we are living here in Northern Ireland, arts provides to apprehend this world, this little island which we are living in. It does apprehend to that. In addition, it also allows the citizens of Belfast or Northern Ireland to participate and develop their creativity and learn about different cultures and different ways of people who are living as their next door neighbors or as their colleagues or working in different areas of work. So arts demands ideas and innovations. It is an economic purpose. It is a learning purpose. It is an educating process. It is a participation purpose. It is to make these cities and creating those shared spaces. And that's the reason. And that's the reason celebrating different cultures in a shared space is very, very important.
But yet we don't here in Northern Ireland a great deal.
Yes, exactly.
So I guess, the expression of culture, what I would say to you is that all too often it appears to me, and I, like you, have a great love and a commitment to working through the arts, but it's divisive. We say, this is my tune, this is his tune. We don't look at the sharing of jigs and reels. We kind of claim things as our own. So I wonder if you could speak to that a bit, or if any of the other speakers would come into that.
I don't agree with that it is, yes, there are certain, it's a perception. It's the stereotype which we are sort of carrying in our heads that Ceilidh is meant for Fla and all that, and Ulster Scots dancing, Highland dancing is meant for Ulster Scots. But if you fuse them and if you make all that, and it is a very, very good examples we have in Northern Ireland of doing that, and you're bringing those cultures through connections, through ragas, through rhythms, to smells, to diversity, and creating that shared space. But yes, there is not many areas in Northern Ireland which has created a very, very good opening shared space. And that's why I find our PUL communities sometimes have been very much left behind, and they are not being recognized for who they are and how they can be shared in our society. So I think it is very important to interweave, and the intercultural arts and intercultural way of living should be brought out, and shared spaces should be created. Without our arts, there's no economy. Where there are arts, there's no hearts. Where there is no arts, there's no education. So I think it is so important that we should be embedding it in every aspect of our life. Arts is the way forward.
Lillian, I agree entirely with you. I know, Lillian, you want to come in. I'm just reminded of a project that I was involved with a few years ago up in Dunmurry, which was on an estate where there was, you mentioned the PUL community, where there was a lot of tension between some South Indian guys who were living on there and the local band, and they both wanted to use the particular community centre, and there was a bit of toing and froing, and the children were having difficulties, so it became a place of tension. And we brought in a jazz drummer to mediate musically between them. And it was really fun because they ended up doing this kind of project together, which I'm sure you've subsequently been involved in those kind of projects, where they actually started to communicate between this, and they didn't actually have to talk, and they became really close, and it worked beautifully. And they do work those intercultural projects. Anyway, Lillian, I'm cutting across you.
No, that's okay. I do think arts can be used to challenge and cause people to rethink and reframe their perceptions. So let's just put it there. But a good example would be like poetry and drama. That we can use that. But I do have a big problem on how we use arts in Northern Ireland to address social inclusion. And I think there are a lot of people would know my views on this.
But for those who don't,
I'm going to share. I think many of us, popular culture is the primary way you learn about people, right? And that's how you get to know the difference between you and other people. The problem, though, many representation are based on cultural stereotype, which tend to marginalize and caricature members of racialized groups. So through those representation, we see a limited and distorted view of others. We don't see the true picture of individuals or the people or the culture or the community that we are talking about. And we have seen, like, for example, in powerful entertainment and news media, are creating and perpetuating those negative stereotypes about the cultural stereotypes about people, especially about racial groups, racial ethnic groups. In television, in films, we've seen the way racial and ethnic groups often fall in that formulaic tropes, and their storyline easily fall into cliches narratives. The consistency of this representation is what reinforces and make them really available within our minds. And when we look at people, we just put them in one box. Look at the film industry itself in particular, where the Black and minority ethnic workers represent just 4.4% in England. We do not even have statistic here in Northern Ireland to know how many are represented there. And then you look at the stigma and of discrimination, which is still very prevalent. But the arts in Northern Ireland have made no stride in changing the perception of people to look at racial groups beyond exotism. I haven't seen that. And don't get me wrong, I love my tradition and I love going and eating different types of food and getting entertained and all that. But I do not believe that arts are going to influence race relations or are going to change equality in Northern Ireland. Absolutely not. And then we're opening spaces for culture only, and that is where we are being put. That's the only space that we can access as minority ethnic people.
I don't know that it's the only access. So just let me ask Ivy just very quickly, do you agree in this exoticization argument which Lillian's putting forward? I know you don't, Nisha, and we'll come back to you in a minute, but just let me give Ivy a reckoning.
Yeah, I think that the arts is a very powerful tool. And for us at the Interethnic Forum, it has opened doors that would never have opened. And sometimes, you need a conversation starter, you need a way to get into a community, and the arts has been very, very useful and powerful. And I would say that, for us as human beings, we're innately curious about the other person's culture and, art. So I think that for me as an Indian, I would always take it as a compliment if somebody comes to me and says that they've participated in Bollywood dancing or they know how to do henna tattoos or rangoli. These are all beautiful things, to be involved in. And I'm always, encouraged by that. And I always feel it's a conversation starter and, it leads to a deeper and better relationship with people. And some of our most difficult communities to get into, like for instance, some of our ex-combatants, we have got started with the arts, and that has led to a strengthening of understanding and relationship building. And so I definitely feel that the arts has a role to play, and it's not necessarily about being exotic, but it is about sharing of cultures, just as I am so interested, as my children have, they have been participating in the dancing here, like over here, the Irish dancing. My daughter was always took part in that, and my son takes part in hurling and, all that, Gaelic football. So I just think that, there is a role there for us to be involved in the arts that is here and vice versa, whether it is through poetry, through literature, through music, or other art forms. I definitely think that as human beings, we are curious, and I love to learn about other art forms from other countries, listen to music from other countries, look at dances from other countries. And I hope that when people look at me, that is what they look at and they say, yeah, of course we want to see Indian dancing or Indian music and learn about that.
Alfie, yeah. I know you've got your hand up there before I come back to Nisha, if I may.
I don't dispute that. I think there is absolutely no problem enjoying dancing and enjoying singing. I think everybody wants to have that. But when we are talking about diversity and inclusion, I don't see how arts are promoting that. If, for example, right now, if you look at here, the notion of diversity have shifted from the focus on racial discrimination to one advances the business case of diversity, seeing the economic growth as the primary justification of policy action rather than the real equality. So I'm talking about, if we're looking about racial equality and mainstreaming that, yes, arts, you can use it to change perception of people, but also you have to be careful because it does reinforce stereotype. That is a fact. And there are a lot of research that has been done and has shown that sometimes such arts and the dances, the foods, they reinforce the stereotype. We cannot deny that.
Lillian, we've got 5 more minutes. Let me cut across you and let Alfie in, because he's been waving his hand very, very elegantly in the background for the last 5 minutes. So
Hello.
Give me 2 minutes to get Alfie in.
Well, just to add my thoughts on it, to me, arts and culture are an important expression of the human soul. Basically, it makes real what is inside each and every one of us. It communicates the qualities that make us human. Whether it's to love, to be compassionate, to create. These are vital skills that we need and need to recognize that we have in common as we work together for our shared society when it comes to racial equality. We should look for the positives that do exist in arts and culture to bring people together for a common goal at the end of it. But how do we ensure that we don't stereotype or tokenize? For start, we just need to stop thinking that it's pure stereotyping or tokenism. We need to challenge and call it out when that happens. So don't start from the position where arts and culture, that's stereotyping. Don't start from that position at all. Free education, what arts and culture is. Like take music, you don't need to speak the language to understand that music can be sad or it can make you happy. That crosses barriers instantly.
Nisha, do you want to respond to that?
No, I totally agree. I totally agree with Alfie and Ivy in this one. And I'm passionate about arts, and I think arts has made a lot of impact, and we have measured that impact. We have reports to show, and arts has got no barriers, and you should know that, Katy, as well, because you have sat on arts councils as a vice chair. We were at the intercultural arts strategy and we worked with it together. So I think it is very important. Arts is the most important tool, and it should be embedded in our racial equality strategy. And that's what we are doing. It is not just celebrating that fourth outcome of cultures. It is changing the perceptions. It is combating the mental health of people. It is also giving education. It is participating. It's contributing in economy. So it is doing so much of the overall package. So I think arts is the most important tool in my
Armory.
To build the social capital and to build the peace and reconciliation.
So Lillian, I have to say, I am not as clear as I would like to be as to why you are so concerned about it. I get tokenism, I get the bhajis and bagels and the saris and samosas approach, which, let's face it, some people actually just really need that because they haven't been exposed to the lives and experiences that some of us have. So, that may be an introductory point to people. So what is it that you have as a resistance within that, given that it's a communicator?
Arts is being used as scapegoats.
Now, that's an interesting point.
It is being used as an escaping goat. So we would use arts to promote diversity, to promote interculturalism. But let me ask a good question. 20 years since the Good Friday Agreement, why is it that when it comes to celebration of diversity and culture, minority ethnic people will be the active participants, but never the passive participants when that comes in? We go to places and you're the one who is out there cooking the food, entertaining people, and you're not really, some of you are not watching it. You're always busy doing, giving all the time. You're just giving. Where is the fact that we cannot go ourselves? Maybe, for example, let's say it's about arts and culture. When we have the Irish dancing, yes, we can go there. We are invited to go and watch, and our children can be taught how to dance. What happens after that? Do we really talk about racism? Do we talk about discrimination? Do we talk when we are going for all that celebration and dancing and happy? do we really talk about the real issues of discrimination in this country when we are doing that? No, we don't. And that is my problem.
Camilla has come into the chat here saying it's being used to scapegoat. It's actually not having hard and uncomfortable conversations. And I absolutely agree with you. That's interesting to me because it isn't a way that I have thought about this before. I've thought not of it as entertainment only, but as Nisha has said, in terms of education, in terms of rethinking, as other ways of communicating. So I don't see it only as something that's consumed, or that's, and I do recognize that sometimes it's used. It's the same as children are. Very often people say, okay, we're going to have an event, we need the children singing in the middle of the event, irrespective of what background they come from. You know, there's always this kind of utilization of a laziness in terms of putting on public processes. But I'm not sure that I agree with you. I think it has a role to play that's a really helpful, instrumental role in building relationships. So I would like this conversation to go on, and we can't because we've got 3 minutes left. So what I'd like to do is take the opportunity to just say very quickly to those who are with us, if you have anything you want to ask the panel, please put it into the chat now. Otherwise, I'm slowly going to wind back and wind down and say thank you very, very much for sharing what you have shared, whether that's today in the group or alternatively in the work that you're doing, because it's all valued, it's all valuable. And I don't think that any one process is the right way to go about it. I genuinely think everybody's way of being and doing is bringing something. So when I started the conversation with you guys earlier, what I did say, and I hope I can go back to it now, is to recognize that all of the panelists here are contributing in different ways to making our society the society that we want to be in. So thank you, I really appreciate it. And thank you particularly to all of those who've made today possible. The John and Pat Hume Foundation is doing really, really important work and has much to contribute to how the minority ethnic communities here are integrated appropriately. And so thank you very much to the foundation. Is there anything anybody would like to say before I go, or can we all wish each other a very peaceful, reconciled and supportive, mutually reciprocal end of day?
No, thank you. Thank you, Katy, and thank you
very much
for having us. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.
Night.